Welcome back. So, this is another S5 history class. If you remember in the previous presentation, we talked about the Crimean War, which you could try to understand as you could try to see as the immediate background to the efforts at national unification by Italy and Prussia, which, you know, integrating other German-speaking territories would become Germany. If we were in a classroom, this is what I would do. Start a discussion about nationalism because, as you know, um, a force behind the effort to create their own nation states in Italy and Germany was nationalism. This idea that if people had um, commonalities, things that they shared, like language, particular culture, traditions, etc., then you know they thought people thought that they had the right to rule themselves and not be ruled by anyone else, by another group of people or another nation, another state. If we were in a classroom, I would ask these questions. What is nationalism? Is it a force for good or evil? How are people expressing nationalism these days? And how was it expressed before, in 19th century Europe? As you can see here, these are pictures of some nationalists in different countries, or nativists. Some of them are nativists. So, for instance, in the US, in Turkey, you know, uh, a government or regime that's supposed to be a democracy, a nation that's supposed to be a democracy, but the regime has been making moves towards a more authoritarian kind of rule. And then also here, as you can see, in Poland, nationalists in Poland, and they are on the rise in many other countries. You can look for these things on YouTube. You can read about them on your own, but that's a question I would like you to keep in mind. So, how did nationalism express itself before? How is it expressing itself now? Now going into the topic for the day, the unification of Italy. So a little bit of context here. In 1850, Austria was the dominant power in Italy. It controlled two regions, Lombardy and Venetia, and then the other areas, the other territories in Italy were separate. They were separate states. Okay, and you have to keep in mind the failed revolts, the failed revolutions that were started by revolutionaries in Italy, but which came to naught. Nothing happened. They weren't able to achieve their goal of unifying, Italian-speaking areas. Now, at this point in the 1850s, late 1840s, early 1850s, people were looking to Piedmont, okay, to this particular kingdom, the kingdom of Sardinia and Piedmont, for leadership. This state was ruled by the House of Savoy and by 1849 by King Victor Emmanuel II. So they were in control of these territories: Piedmont, Sardinia, Nice, and Savoy. So here's Victor Emmanuel II, pictured here with his elegant looking mustache and long goatee. I'm sure there are names for those types of facial hair. Now, we start in northern Italy. Victor Emmanuel would name Cavour, Camillo di Cavour, as his prime minister, and Cavour was a practitioner of realpolitik, or the politics of reality. What is this? What is realpolitik? Realpolitik is a way of doing politics that did not rely on ethical or ideological principles. What does that mean? So, if if you practiced realpolitik, that means that if you had something that you wanted to achieve, you wouldn't ask yourself whether this course of action or that course of action was good or bad, or whether, they were consistent with your own principles, with your own beliefs. No. What you would ask yourself would be questions like, what do I need to do in order to achieve that objective, in order to get what I want? In practical terms, what do I need to do in order to get what I want, in order to achieve my political objectives? Okay, regardless of whether they're good or bad, whether they're ethical, whether they are consistent with some political philosophy or ideology. So it's a very practical a way of thinking that takes into consideration, the real conditions on the ground, you might say, you know. So he was a very dedicated prime minister. He he worked towards economic expansion, the improvement of the economy, so that at least northern Italy, parts of northern Italy, the kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia and the two other territories would, would have increased revenue, and this would also mean that you would be able to, you know, um, equip a large army, just in case you had to go to war in order to get what you want. Um, being a cunning and intelligent person, Cavour allied northern Italy or parts of northern Italy with France, with Napoleon III, and wanting, a confrontation with Austria, since, as we said, parts of Italy, of what is now Italy, belonged at that time to Austria. So Cavour devised a way to provoke the Austrians to invade Piedmont, and so that, you know, in response, the French and the Italians would go to war against Austria. So what were the results of the Franco-Austrian War, also known as the Second War of Italian Independence, or the Austro-Sardinian War? So, Cavour promised Savoy and Nice to Louis Napoleon, so they were, after the conflict, they were given to France. Lombardy was awarded to Piedmont, so as you can see there, that becomes part of the kingdom of Victor Emmanuel II. Austria kept Venetia, and then the other Italian states here towards the north of Italy, they decided, okay, we've had enough. We want to join the rest of this growing Italian kingdom. So they overthrew their governments, and they decided in 59 and 60 that they wanted to join. So I'm talking about Parma, Modena, and Tuscany. Now keep in mind that uh, these places, the Papal States, were still not part of this growing kingdom. And you also still have the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, these two territories which were until this time controlled by a branch of the Bourbon monarchy. So you could say, if you wanted a unified Italy, the job wasn't done yet. Okay, so there was still the south to be dealt with. Now, southern Italy, you have another figure, Giuseppe Garibaldi. He was a revolutionary and Italian patriot, quite dedicated to the cause of, you know, of putting together and founding an Italian nation. So he had an army of volunteers. They were called the Red Shirts or the Thousand Red Shirts because of the clothes that they wore, as you can see here. Um, so Garibaldi would start in the south of Italy. They landed in Sicily. They encouraged and helped revolts against the Bourbon king. By July 1860, they had control over the island. So afterwards, they would go, to the continent, that part of the continent here. Garibaldi and his other revolutionaries, and we're talking about August 1860, and by September, the kingdom of the two Sicilies fell. So they fell to the revolutionaries. The Bourbons are expelled, and eventually Garibaldi would offer all his conquests to Victor Emmanuel II. So by March 1871, a new kingdom, an expanded kingdom of Italy under Victor Emmanuel was proclaimed. You can see here on the left quite a well-known sketch or political cartoon. Garibaldi, you know, on his knees, helping Victor Emmanuel put on the Italian boot, okay, giving up his conquests for the sake of a unified Italian nation state. If you've ever been to Rome, you've probably seen this. This monument is quite massive and it's a tourist attraction for sure. Um, the Victor Emmanuel II monument, also called the Altar of the Fatherland. So you hear echoes of nationalism there. That Italians, these Italians who wanted to unify, they saw themselves as the sons of the fatherland of Italy. So you have echoes of nationalism there, shared tradition, shared language, shared culture, belonging to one community, and also perhaps a little bit of romanticism as well. And yet, Italian unification was not yet complete. As we saw a few minutes ago, Venetia, this region still belonged to Austria, but the Italians were quite clever. In 1866, they sought the help of the Prussians and they goaded the Austrians into a conflict. Italy sided with the Prussians, and the Prussians, being a success, until this point a successful military state, defeated Austria, and for their part in the war, Venetia was eventually awarded to Italy. Now, if you go back to the map, if all of this now belongs to Italy, all of that as well, and this isle, and this island, so you still had the Papal States. Now, the Papal States and Rome in particular, they were under the power of the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, and the Pope was supported by the French. Now, how does this go? The Prussians go to war against the French, and again Italy, wanting something out of this, sided with the Prussians. The Prussians defeat the French, and as part of the deal, in the aftermath of this conflict, French troops withdraw from Rome, and this gives the Italians an opportunity to annex Rome. So they're able to annex Rome in 1870, and by 1871, it's proclaimed as the capital of this new Italian nation state. Okay, there you go. That's Italy. Up next, Germany.